concluded that Britain is a model to the world on diversity. The report states that the well-meaning idealism of many young people who claim the country is still institutionally racist is not borne out by the evidence. I've got to tell you, tell that to Mina Smallman, who was mourning her 2 black daughters whilst police officers took selfies with their dead bodies and shared images on WhatsApp. Tell that to Doreen Lawrence, who is still seeking justice for the death of her son Stephen. And tell that to Belly Majinga, who died of coronavirus after a man spat at her while she was working at a train station. Or you could speak to the mother of Leon Briggs, who died in police custody after being restrained face down on the floor by police officers in Luton. Or just go back to last summer and speak to Bianca Williams, who was stopped and searched while driving home from a training session, handcuffed, whilst her 3-month-old son was screaming in the back seat. Tell that to those who are frightened or distrustful of the British state to be vaccinated. Just yesterday, it was reported that over 70s with black African heritage are 7 times more likely to present for this COVID vaccine than their white counterparts. British people, white and black, are dying to turn the page on racism. They're working in food banks to support the marginalised. They're teaching in after-school clubs to raise awareness. They're working in rehabilitation centres to end the cycle of disproportionate mass incarceration. Boris Johnson has just slammed the door in their faces by telling them that they're idealists, they're wasting their time. He's let an entire generation of young, white and black British people down. Just as people marched against South Africa to free Mandela, and Margaret Thatcher stood in their way. Just as folk got together and marched for an inquiry into the death of Stephen Lawrence, and John Major stood in their way. Now young people across the country come together and say, yes, black lives do matter. And guess what? Boris Johnson stands in their way. Let's not forget that this report was rushed out in response to the overwhelming desire for change after the murder of George Floyd, where thousands of people rallied for the black men, women and children suffering, still excluded in this country because of institutional racism. This report could have been a turning point and a moment to come together. Instead, it has chosen to divide us once more and keep us debating the existence of racism rather than doing anything about it. The report could have called and implemented Baroness Ruby McGregor Smith's recommendation for a mandatory ethnicity pay gap reporting. It didn't. The report could have called for the implementation in full of my recommendations for a fairer criminal justice system. It didn't. The report could have honoured the memory of those who died at Grenfell Tower by acknowledging that black and Asian children are more likely in this country to live above the 4th floor of our high-rise blocks across England. And guess what? It didn't. This report could have drawn attention to the disproportionate exclusion rates of black Caribbean boys at our school, but it didn't. Yes, we need to do more. Of course we do in this country for white working class boys. And yes, we need to tackle unemployment, particularly in many of our northern towns. And we need to eradicate poverty, child poverty in our seaside towns. Of course, race is not the only story. Nobody claims it is. This is a way more complex country than that. But race is an important part of the story. And I want to see black and white working class kids aspire for greatness. Equality is not a competition. It's an endeavour that requires us to be honest about the full range of obstacles that still exist in this country. And yes, that includes institutional racism. To say that Britain is a model to the world is to say that our police officers don't shoot as many black people as they do in the United States. It's to say that we don't jail 70% of Muslims like they do in France, where their prison population from people from a Muslim Arab background is so extraordinarily high, 70%. It's to say that we don't lock up Indigenous children in detention centres like they do in Australia. Is that really the standard on which the UK wants to compare itself? I say to Tony, you sit down with Mina Smallman. You sit down with Doreen Lawrence. You sit down with Belly Majenga's family. You sit down with Leon Briggs's family. You sit down with Bianca Williams. And if you really sat down with them, you would do so much more to heal their pain. It's an insult to everybody and anybody across this country who experiences institutional racism, and it's an insult to generations of white and black Britons who have come together, determined, walking and sitting together, so many teachers across our country, trying to go into schools and do their best to turn the page on this. I tell myself that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And I know that thousands of you are right there beside me. It would help, frankly, if this government were not so determined to bend the arc backwards.